This is my story. I'm hoping that some of my stories will help you remember some of the lessons that I hope to share. I'll have a couple of themes that kind of run throughout, so see if you can pick them out as we go. But the stories are to help remember, and the themes are hopefully to help you. It starts on a farm, a dairy farm. That's where I grew up, in a small place called Kalmar, Alberta. So I was a farm kid, right? Farm kids have lots of fun, lots of freedom, a little bit lonely because our closest neighbor was a kilometer away. It was a good thing I liked my cousins because that's who it was. As farm kids, we had to work, chores, right? Yeah, it started young. I learned to gather eggs. I've got the peck marks on my hands to prove it. Help things like wash the milking machines and put them together. As I got older and older, the chores got harder and harder. So when I was 12 years old, my brother went off to college, and I got the job of milking cows with my dad, right? So every morning, well, not every morning, but quite a few mornings, I'd get up, help milk cows. But my job was to wash the udders and things, and then go to school, and then come home and milk cows again. So that was all good, but I learned a few things in that barn. I got really strong, by the way, carrying milk around, but I learned a few things. One of the things was I learned a little bit of Swedish. Vi har 24 svart och vit mjölkkor. Anybody understand that? Yeah, there we go. We have 24 black and white milk cows. It's funny the things you remember. I can also say, vi har 3 katt och 3 kattungar. 3 cats and 3 kittens. It's only Swedish I remember from back then. But I also think that I learned my work ethic in that barn. Because we got up, we had fun, and we learned. Now, my dad didn't graduate high school. It was always one of his regrets. He really liked math, and he really regretted not actually being able to use that as he went forward. So he wanted all of us children to be good at school. It was one of the things he was really passionate about, especially math. So he coached us a lot, and he tested us. One of the things he did when he tested us was if we got an answer wrong or didn't know it, he made fun of us. I think it was his way of motivating us, but it didn't work very well, right? It didn't work very well. I went to school from grade 1 to grade 12 in that school. Same kids I started with were who I graduated with. But I was the child who went through school invisible. Never raised my hand. Never volunteered for a question. Because I was scared I would look foolish. But I did make it through school. And one of the things that I've learned since then is I have a little mantra. And it goes in my head. It says, what is the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? So I'm standing up here, and I think the worst thing that can happen is I burst into tears. Yeah, well, you guys are all my friends and support group. Or I can't get the screen working. We solved that, you know. What's the worst that can happen? Sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. It is not always the thing. It is not always a win. So never, ever give up. Now, I graduated high school. I went to work for the government. I did okay in school, but I chose not to go to university because I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went to work for the government as a clerk typist 1-2. That was my title, because I could type 35 words a minute. Yeah. I really didn't like those jobs too much, but I made it through. I got married. See, I was a baby. I had children, 2 daughters. Now, getting married and having children didn't change my life. I don't consider that a pivotal moment. It was what was expected of me. It was part of growing up. But one of my children kind of caused my really first pivotal moment, I think, in my life. My oldest daughter, she was a little bit younger. She was 3 years old. She was a climber. Anybody have climbers as children? Yeah. I found her on top of the fridge one time. I found her on top of the monkey bars in the playground. Turned my back for 30 seconds and she was on top. No idea how she got there because the steps are this far and she was 3. I literally had to climb up to get her down. So I wanted to enroll her in gymnastics so she'd learn how to control her body and hopefully learn how to fall so she didn't kill herself. But the gymnastics club didn't allow 3-year-olds in. So I fought and we finally made this deal. It was quite an aggressive negotiation. I got her in. Yay, 3 months before her 4th birthday. But then I went to my first annual general meeting. I'm sitting there. This is my first volunteer organization. I'm sitting there wondering what's going to happen. And they start, and the executive all stands up in the front, and they said, "We're tired. We've been doing this for too long. Nobody has volunteered. So unless somebody stands up in this club tonight, we're shutting it down." I went, whoa, that's not good. So I wait, my invisible self, waiting for somebody to volunteer. I was sitting next to another mom whose daughter was in the same class as I was. We're looking at each other and going, what? And the guy says it again. This club will shut down if nobody volunteers. I looked at Nancy and I said, you ready? She might have actually done it to me, I don't know, too many years ago. We raised our hands. I became president. She became treasurer. It was 2 years of lots of scary stuff, like presenting at the AGMs and giving interviews and going out and raising money and all kinds of things, but a real learning experience for me. As we started that gym club, we built it. We built it from a fairly small one into a significant presence in the province. But I couldn't have done it without the support of Nancy, because we did a lot of things together, but the other people around us. My youngest daughter got really, really good at coloring in meetings, being quiet. But we learned. So the lessons out of here are things like, make sure you have support. Do not be afraid to stick up your hand. Do not be afraid to try. And really, find that inner strength that you all have and do it. Now, some things aren't pivotal moments. I was finding myself kind of like kids were in school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Marit had a saying today, don't be afraid to ask for what you want. And I wanted to be a graphic artist. And I thought, great, I'll take some courses. None were available for when my daughter was home or was in kindergarten. So I was driving by the newspaper one day and I thought, you know what? They have graphic artists. I'll bet I could go and learn from them. So I went in And I asked the guy, I said, so I would really like to work in your graphic art department. And he said, we're not hiring. And I went, not hiring? That's okay. I can volunteer. So I did. I volunteered to work in their graphic art department, and I got Monday, Wednesday, Friday. He was skeptical at first, but I did. I went in 3 days a week. I learned, but I also added value. A person can influence their surroundings. That wasn't a big pivotal moment, but I learned I could influence things around me. I didn't have to stop and wait for it to happen. And I think that's very important. Be persistent. Keep trying. Now, a pivotal moment happened one day when Jack came home from work. The girls were 6 and 8 at the time. And he comes home and he says, I have this opportunity. We can go overseas to Singapore. I went, whoa, sounds exotic, doesn't it? Cool. And I said, okay. So we made the decision, but it meant leaving all our friends and family. Picking up everything and going away. We had to commit for 2 years. Jack left 2 months earlier than I did, which meant that I had to sell the house, have a huge garage sale, haul our children. He still, by the way, complains that I lost his pipe, sold it or something, but had to sell everything and move, taking 2 young children on several planes to get to Singapore. I was in Singapore. It was quite lovely. But it was really lonely because I had no communications. This was in the early 80s. No emails. Phones were, if you could get through, were horribly expensive, so I couldn't just phone home. No Skype, no Zoom, no nothing. And Jack traveled about 80% of the time. So I learned to stand on my own 2 feet. I learned that I could make decisions on my own, probably for the first time in my life. I learned that I could be independent. It was a huge learning thing for me. Now, I'm not sure whether Jack will agree and if he would have made that same decision, because it's not always been pleasant, but But we came back. And so I'm this new independent woman, and I'm going, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I didn't want to go back to work for the government. My children were in school. So I thought about it a little bit. I looked at my high school marks. I went, okay, I got maths and sciences, not so good at writing, memorization. What can I do? I decided not to do college because the times were too restrictive. I had 2 children in competitive sports. I had to be able to drive them around. So I ended up deciding on university. I took out the university calendar and I went, I got 2 options. I could do home economics. I never learned to cook and clean, by the way, because I was in the barn. Or I could do computer science, which sounded way more interesting. I upgraded my math, and I applied. I got accepted. And I went, oh, all right. But it was really hard to decide how I was going to do that. I didn't even know if I could, because it was really quite scary. But I did. I, took that chance. And I went to university. I tested the waters first, though. I went in and I decided to take 2 courses the first semester. I wanted to do a fun course, and I wanted to do something to show if I could learn. The fun course I took was Swedish. I took 3 years of Swedish. I don't remember very much of it anymore. The other course I took was statistics, because I figured if I could learn statistics, I could learn anything, right? That's the theory. That's the theory. I did pass that physics course. I didn't do tremendously well, but I passed it. So the next semester I jumped in, took a full course load. Now, I went into this university, into computer science. I had a few things going against me. I was a minority. I was older. I had kids that I was responsible for and had to drive around. And I was a woman. But I chose a group of friends, at least I like to think I chose them deliberately, but I had a group of friends and support group there that knew that I didn't have time to party, knew that I didn't have a lot of time to spend in the university working. And so I looked at this as a challenge, but I didn't realize how much I was really alone until one day I was sitting in one of the theaters, and it was a logics class, and the professor says, "I have a question, and I hope the lady in the room won't be offended." And I went, lady in the room? And so I kind of turned around, and it's a class of like 300 people. And I went, ouch. Yeah, and it really made me realize how different I was than just about everyone else in that room. They were all 20-some young men, right? But I persevered, I really did. Now, I made a lot of choices, so I learned how to prioritize in there, because I had to make choices. I sometimes said, I am not doing this assignment. I will take that deduction off my final grade, because I just didn't have the time. I learned to study in the back row of swimming pools or in the gym. I was really good. That's where you'd find me. I stayed up really late at night after the kids were in bed to do homework. I graduated. My grades were good enough. It was not the top of the class, but my grades were good enough. So the things that I learned, well, besides getting my comp sci degree, was don't let age stop you. Don't let that stop you. Just keep doing. Don't be intimidated by others you think might be smarter than you or know more than you, because they probably don't. And then the third thing is, if you want something bad enough, find a way to make it happen. Go after it. Make choices that matter to you. Now, I went out, and again, we ended up moving. Jack got a transfer. So I was in a strange city and had to find a first job. So I'm out there competing against all these other university grads who have experience because they've been doing summer jobs or maybe co-op students. I didn't have any of that. So I went on my first interview. And my resume was okay, my grades were okay. I went on that first interview, and I realized as I was sitting there that I was across from these 3 young men, and they were asking all the wrong questions. And I realized that I was not going to get that job. There was no way. I was the wrong demographic. I was not a good fit. So I went back and I looked at my resume, and I realized that this resume will never get me a job because I have no experience. It's that catch-22 thing. So I went back and I looked at my own life experiences, and I said, all right, let's see what I got. Well, turns out I had lots. I had attention to detail from judging gymnastics. I had decision-making powers from being the president of that gym club. I had excellent time management skills from doing all that juggling at university. So I put those things into my resume, and I sent it out again. The next interview I went on, I thought of myself differently. And the hiring manager, I was really quite fortunate that that hiring manager understood the value of life experiences. I got that job. Now, if you need to know, so lesson, know your strengths. Look at your own life lessons because you all have them. How can you use them? How can you bring them into your own experience? Now, on that job, I was a programmer, right? I was a decent programmer. I don't know if I'd ever call myself an excellent programmer, but I learned some things in this job, and one of them was the power of testing. My supervisor came in we didn't have testers, by the way, no testers. We came in every single morning, and my supervisor would sit beside me, and he goes, "Janet, what are you going to do today? How are you going to test that?" So we'd walk through it. He'd lead. He'd come back at the end of the day, and he'd go, "So, Janet, what did you do, and how did you test it?" Every day for 3 months, till my probation time was up. And then he kind of slowed down. He'd come in every once in a while. But at that point, I never realized how some small things can affect later on. There's some things you do not recognize until much, much later in life. He gave me a value of testing. Now, and again, my life turned around. We got transferred again. I was a programmer in this other company in Calgary. And I was there programming for about 1.5 years, and my boss come to me one day and he said, "Janet, you're the one programmer that is constantly complaining about testing and lack of. We're going to start a test team. Would you be our QA manager?" I went, maybe. I didn't want to be a programmer for my whole entire life, so I said yes. But it turns out that company really didn't believe in quality. I'm not sure what they were looking for, but the testing end of that was not a good place to be. It came to a head when I found myself in the development manager's office. We were having a yelling match, an out-and-out yelling match. When it was about some silly development thing, I have no idea what it was, but our boss walked into that room with us yelling, and he said, "You're scaring the programmers." And he left the room and closed the door. What? So I just stopped dead in my tracks. I turned around. When I walked through that door, I was a different person. I walked back to my office, probably had a really good cry, but I also had an introspective. And I realized that I did not like the person I had become. Who was this person yelling at somebody else? Who was this person who had learned to swear? I do not swear. I went home, wrote up my resignation letter, brought it in, and gave it to him, to my boss the next day. He never, ever asked me why I was leaving. Never, ever. Now, that is one of the biggest lessons I learned, was make sure your workplace matches your own ethics, because if it does not, it is unhealthy for your body, for your mind. I spent years after that trying to get rid of some of the bad memories in my mind. Not worth it. I moved to another job, and I was a QA manager. We were trying XP, We really didn't know what it was, this extreme programming, but we worked together and had a really good relationship. Now, one of the things that with this new job I was going to be expected to do was give presentations. And I knew from that president job that I did at the gym club that I was really bad at it. But I didn't really know how bad I was. It came, so one day, Jack's my husband, by the way, we were up at a podium, supposed to be giving our welcome speech to our son-in-law, right? I had done all this magic. I wrote this wonderful speech. It was so good. And Jack was supposed to do this comic relief afterwards, comparing the warranty on a toaster to, anyhow, it was funny. It's on YouTube. It's really worthwhile watching. But as we stood up there, and I'm supposed to read, he must have seen the panic on my face. I couldn't utter a word. Not a sound come out of my mouth. So Jack just quietly took the piece of paper, pulled it over, read the speech, did his comic routine. That's the piece that every single person remembered. Nobody knew that I was even supposed to do anything. So it worked out okay, but I knew, and I was devastated. So I beat myself up about it, for weeks. And one day I was in the office and I was complaining to a fellow colleague, and he said, "Janet, I can help you." And I went, "Yeah? Okay." I went with him to Toastmasters that Thursday morning at 6:45 a.m. And I went for the next 10 years to that Toastmasters group at 6:45 a.m. every Thursday. It took me months before I had enough courage to even do my first icebreaker speech, which is 4 minutes introducing yourself. How hard can that be? Well, I got up, my hands were sweaty, my knees were shaky, my voice is cracky. But the club members were very supportive, and they gave really good feedback. But the feedback I remember most was, "And remember to breathe." So I must have gone all 4 minutes without taking a single breath. So lessons out of that was, don't be afraid to share your failures, right? Because there's people out there that will help you. And when they offer, take the help. And remember to breathe. Now, I'm going to go into my Agile journey a little bit, because this was kind of a pivotal moment for me too. I left that job. Well, actually, I didn't leave it. It was a dot-com bust, and I got laid off. But it worked out really well, because I decided to leave management. I'd had enough of that. And I went back as a tester on an Agile team. When I walked into that team, a lot of you will have heard this story, but one of the programmers came up to me and said, "Janet, you're a tester. We're doing extreme programming. We do all our own testing and automation. What are you going to do?" He was just curious. He was curious. And I said, getting up all my best courage, I said, "I don't know. Let's figure it out together." But in the meantime, I ran home, did a bunch of research, sent this panic email to Brian Merrick, who said, to say, "Help." He was one of the signatories on the Agile Manifesto and the only one who was testing at all. And he sent me back an email, which I'll be forever grateful for. And he gave me Lisa's name. He said, "Lisa's writing a book. Ask her." So I did. Pivotal moment. Reached out, asked Lisa. She reached back, answered all my questions. Thank you. And gave me the privilege of reviewing that book she was working on. So there are some people in this world that are helpers, and Lisa's one of those. But it's important to remember to give back as well. So hopefully reviewing the book gave her some things as well. As we reach out to people, remember that they're there with the best of intentions. Now, I went to my first Agile conference in about, I think, 2002. I met Lisa. I hadn't met her before. I met Brian Merrick. I had not met him before. But I met a really remarkable person. Oops, I forgot to put Lisa up on the screen, because her and her donkeys. But I met a really remarkable person. Her name is Mary Poppendick. I decided that she was going to be my role model. She wrote the Lean Agile Development, or Lean Development series, her and her husband. But it's not because of her writing, not because of her presentation skills. Those are all great, but it was because of her lifestyle. She and her husband traveled the world doing conferences and training and consulting, and I thought, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to be. Had no idea how I would get there. It seemed impossible at the time, right? But we change, we move. Now, Lisa started asking me to, well, actually, it wasn't asking, I think it was dragging. But she asked me to pair with her on presentations. And I'm going, no, I can't do that. But I did. And I paired with her until I was confident enough to give my own talks. And in the meantime, I was consulting or working with teams, not so much consulting, but working on teams, sometimes as an employee, sometimes as a contractor in Calgary. But giving these presentations and working with these different teams gave me enough confidence to be a consultant. So I was working and moving along. It was great. Now, this is where the fame and, well, maybe not fortune so much, but 2008, Lisa comes to me again and she says, hey, Janet, I've been asked to write a book. Would you help me? Nah, I can't write. I hate writing. I don't know how to write. I almost failed my grade 12 English because I failed my essay part. My grammar was great, but my essay was terrible. I can't write. Old tapes running through my head. But as you probably know, yes, we wrote the book, all 575 pages of it. Yeah. That did not change my life, well, except for the year and a half where we had absolutely no time. Our poor husbands were cooking and cleaning, and yeah, they're really good support people. But what came after did, because one of my potential clients said, so, Janet, do you have a course to go with this book? I go, no. We have no training. We don't know how to do that. We have no course. And that client said, but we have a training department that will work with you to put one together. So stepped again and new adventure. That course changed my life because all of a sudden it opened up the world of travel. And I got to travel to all kinds of places, but I was still traveling alone, which wasn't a lot of fun. Now, I used past experiences and past lessons to help me. So things like my fear of public speaking made me go to Toastmasters, so I have skills to actually do this. My living overseas in Singapore and Jakarta gave me skills to adapt to new places and new areas that may or may not speak English. And even things like my support system, which I developed over the years, gave me the confidence to do that. So that was really important. Now, about 5 years ago, Jack retired. He started coming with me, which made life so much better on the road. But travel takes its toll. I had everything I wanted. I was traveling with my husband. I was training. I was doing all these wonderful things. And then one weekend, when we were in Shanghai, we decided to go to Beijing, just to go see, I wanted to go see the Great Wall of China and the Forbidden City. Little did I know that the pollution in Beijing that weekend was the worst it had been for a very long time. You couldn't even see across the street. It had some kind of toxic effect on my lungs and took away my voice. I need my voice. That's my job. But I couldn't hardly whisper. I was just like this. So figured out what to do, a little bit of reaction, and oops, there we go. I missed something. I missed those things. Second book, the award. But I had to go get a speaker system. Yeah, I was in the middle of a story. I couldn't go back. But I had to go out and get a speaker system and take it with me everywhere I went, even to small groups of 4 people, because I couldn't whisper. I couldn't talk over a whisper. So I got to be an electrician and all kinds of other things. It was cool. But part of my fame and fortune was the second book, winning the award 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I don't remember. 3 years ago? Yeah. But life keeps going. The adventures keep going. This year, Lisa and I overcame our fear of cameras. We'd been fighting this one for a while, by the way, and did a course, a video course. As Jose mentioned, we have this new endeavor, this Agile testing fellowship. It is putting me so far outside my comfort zone, you don't believe. But it's an adventure, and we're going to see where it goes. Now, this is my life, and these moments are things that I have found, lessons I have learned. I really actually recommend that everybody do this. Go back and look at your life. It was very enlightening. So, did anybody see some of the themes? Things like some moments just happen and you react to that specific moment. You cope as best you can. There are some moments that are small, they're not pivotal, but maybe they affect the way you look at life, right? So things like my dad making fun of me, I'm sure he was trying to be motivating, but that put me in a space where I'm not comfortable. I've done things like never raise a hand in a meeting or ran out of a room crying once because something triggered. No, those things are never known until after the fact. And then there's pivotal moments. The ones where you have options in front of you and you make decisions. Don't be afraid to take the scary way, because sometimes that's where the most learning can happen. That's where sometimes the most rewarding things can happen. You will learn stuff along the way and be able to apply it from many different places. Even if you fail, you learn something. The second thing is, you are who you are. Be true to yourself. You are the only person in this world that has your experience and your knowledge. So take that and run with it, right? It's yours. Hold on to it. The third thing is make relationships. Oops, I should be clicking. Opportunities. Don't be afraid. And relationships. Reach out to people. Make sure you have that support group. Learn from them. Put yourself with other people, people who can help you, people that understand where you're at. How you respond to the moments in your life, I believe, is what makes the difference in who we are. There's people in your life, people who have been there in the past, who will help you get through things. So Nancy, my treasurer, every once in a while she comes and she sits and she said, we can do this, right? There's people around, there's people around you, yes, that will help you. Know who they are. I heard a phrase in Star Canada a couple weeks ago, and I really thought it was an amazing term. Who is in your front row? Who is there supporting you? Who is there helping you along the way? I think it's important for you to know that. So I'm just going to kind of finish up a little bit with where I think my future might be and what I'll be looking at. Right? I still am going to talk and speak and train because I like to do that. I am still going to go to conferences because I love to be here. I am still going to travel because I still like traveling. I just likely will never go back to Beijing. It is off my list. But I do want to spend more time with my grandchildren. Aren't they cute? I want to be able to teach them things, maybe painting, maybe coding, I don't know. But I also want to learn from them. So I'd love to spend the summers with them. So part of what I want is more of a life-work balance. I don't know if I'll make it, I don't know if that'll happen, but that's where my goal is, not to be gone on a constant basis. So I'm just going to leave you with one last piece of advice. Stay present, stay in the moment, because you never know where your next pivotal moment might be, and you want to be ready to take it when it's there. Thank you.